he met a Japanese visitor, and they were on a train. And he was describing to this Japanese visitor what it was like to live in America where you have this diversity, and you have people from all these different religions and these different nationalities and these different races. And he, with great excitement, he was trying to tell them, well, we have white people and black people and Asian people and Christians and Muslims and Jews and people who don't have any religion and people, all these different, and this is what America is all about. And the guy listened to him very intently, and then he nodded and he said, "Oh, now I understand your distress. It must be just awful to live in a society where you can't look around and see that you all share the same culture." And the poor guy goes, "That's not what I was trying to get him to understand." But think about it. If you are a Japanese child growing up in Japan, it's real easy to explain Japanese identity to a Japanese child. In that society, everybody's Japanese. Your mother's Japanese, your father's Japanese, your uncles, your grandparents, your friends, your neighbors, everybody. And everybody has the same culture. You don't have to look at each other and say, "Oh, really, that's an interesting thing. Why do you do that instead of this?" Because everybody does the same thing. In complex societies like ours, it's much harder for children to form an identity because there are so many groups around and they need to know which one they fit in. Now, there are places in America where you can go and it's like the Japanese guy because the state you live in, the city you live in, the community you live in is like that. But if you're in Detroit, and if you're at Wayne State, it's different. I happen to think it's a lot more fun, but that's my personal opinion, and a lot of people think I'm a little goofy. But it is a bigger problem to explain identity and to develop an identity when the individual belongs to multiple groups. And that's really what I'm talking about here, is identity formation for an individual. Now, for all of us, who, even if we are one person, one group, like we are all African American or all Polish American or whatever, to learn our identity in a multiple identity society. But think about if you, and some of you may be multi-identity people, your parents are different, or the groups you come from, your ancestral groups are different. And that's very hard to explain identity. Let me give you two examples. And the first guy I've named Luigi Di Lorenzo, and he is fictional. I made him up. He was born and reared in the United States, but his parents were both born in Italy. They were reared there. They came over here as adults. He learned to speak Italian when he was a kid. He's engaged. Guess who? His fiancée is also Italian-American. His parents were born and raised in Italy. She speaks Italian. How's he going to identify himself? He's probably going to say, "I'm an Italian-American." How did he know? Well, first of all the time he was growing up, his father and mother were telling him, "You are Italian-American, you should be proud of this. We are Italian-American, we do this and that and something else." He goes to family gatherings, and his aunts and his uncles and his grandparents are going to tell him the same thing. He probably lives in an Italian-American neighborhood, and his neighbors are all going to tell him the same thing. Every place he goes, you're an Italian-American, don't forget that. He went to school, and the teachers and the kids, even if they were different, would say, "Oh, that's Luigi, that's Lou." They probably call him Lou now. And he's Italian. Everybody knows that. Every questionnaire he ever answered in his life said, "What is your nationality background?" And he put a little box next to Italian. He hasn't got lots of problems, unless he decides he wants to move out. Let's take somebody else, and this is a real person. It's not his real name. I'm calling him San Antonio. Sam was one of my respondents. Again, not his name. His name, his real name, is Italian sounding, so it does sound like San Antonio. His father's Italian. His mother's not Italian. His mother's Irish. And he goes to his mother's family gatherings, and he goes to his father's family gatherings, and they're different. And they say different things, and they talk differently, and they emphasize different things. And so he knows that there's these two perspectives. Even in his house, he talked about how his father would say some things and his mother would say different things. And his father would constantly remind them, "You're Italians." And then when his father's believing, well, don't forget the Irish side, his mother will remind them. And when St. Patrick's Day came out, she had to drag out the shamrocks and the green hats and stuff like that. His father, that's a lot of nonsense. Here's a guy who's getting two messages. He doesn't want to be Italian. He doesn't want to be Irish. He wants to be just American. Does he get a chance? Not in your life. Because he kind of looks Italian. He's a little darker skinned. His name sounds Italian. And he says, every place I go, people will say, "Oh, you're Italian, aren't you?" Or, "What are you really?" And he'd say, "I'm an American." "No, but what are you really?" Whenever he lists his culture, puts down Americans, but what are you really? It's not just American. That's what I mean when I say it is hard for a person who is in this either or, neither nor kind of category to come up with a sense of identity. What's his group? Who is he? And that's true for everybody that's in this assimilator category. I don't know if you've heard this statement, it takes a village to raise a child. It comes from an African axiom, I've been told. Hillary Clinton made it popular in a book she wrote. And there's no question that they're right. I've heard the religious right side, no it doesn't, it takes a family. Well, that ignores the fact that every child in every family at some point has to walk outside the front door and either go to school or play in the neighborhood, or even if they school them at home, when they get to college or work, they're going to have to meet some people who are different. And so that Japanese guy was right. You're going to eventually meet somebody different from you if you live here. And the community is going to have an impact on this person's identity. What levels of identity? We're talking about society as a whole. The city or the town where you live, the neighborhood. Like I say, if you live in a very conservative town in Nebraska, you may not have to worry about this either. The neighborhood, the economic and ethnic makeup of your neighborhood, your own individual ethnic backgrounds, all this stuff plays a role in the child's formation of an identity. And these are people who are growing up in this huge mix. So what we did was examine the role of communities in the identity formation of these mixed background people. We're talking on three levels: the larger or dominant community, the local community of the city, town, and the neighborhood. And we're also going to talk about the ethnic communities themselves. And for a lot of these people, these villages were not very friendly villages. They were kind of nasty. Let's first talk about the dominant community. The dominant community role appears in things like the first part of questionnaires and censuses. And nobody can avoid it. In American society, if you go to school, very early they're going to hand you or your parents a questionnaire that's going to say, list all this stuff: race, ethnic background, language spoken at home, things like that. I remember one of my respondents who was, I called Teresa, these are all pseudonyms, and her mother was white and her father was African, not African American, but African. And she talked to me about how upset she was every time she got a questionnaire, or because she always had to check a box. And she said, I don't want to check the black box because that's only half of me. I want to check them both. Nobody will let me check them both. We can now, as of the 2000 census. But for most of those people's lives, no, one box, pick one. And if you don't pick the one we think you should have picked, we're going to erase what you put.